going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment in my Predator review series where I discuss all the Predator movies in the lead up to my review of Prey. And today we're talking about the third film, 2010's Predators. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie related content like the rest of this review series on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about Predators. This sees a group of elite warriors parachute into an unfamiliar jungle and are hunted by members of a merciless alien race. This is directed by Nimrod Andal, though you might find yourself commonly referring to this one as Robert Rodriguez's movie, as this originated from a treatment he had for a third Predator movie from the 90s, and he's also a producer, with many of the interior scenes being shot at his studio in Austin, Texas. And this technically is a sequel to the first Predator movies, with characters acknowledging the events of the first movie in particular at one point, though it serves as something of a reboot of the franchise. Whereas Predator 2 moved the action to the open city of Los Angeles, this is a back-to-basics approach that sees a different group of characters in the jungle, with this just being them against the Predator, though this time, this takes place on a completely different planet rather than on Earth. And the title has a double meaning, as we do see more than one Predator in this movie. However, the title also refers to the fact that all the protagonists are either unsavory people or have made grave mistakes in their past that they might regret, so that they themselves are viewed also as predators. A number of them are former military personnel who messed up on the job, some are assassins, and there's even a death row inmate in there as well. Some definitely feel remorse for what they did, but these aren't meant to be the easiest people to like, which is a bold move for your movie, as it's generally difficult to pull off a good film without having characters who we can connect with or like. But this makes it work, as you do have a very talented cast, even down to some of the most minor of roles. In addition to Adrian Brody, Topher Grace, and Alice Braga in the lead roles, you also have Lawrence Fishburne, Danny Trejo, Walton Goggins, and even Mahershala Ali before he got really big. It's a fantastic cast all around. Now, while I thought everyone was solid and elevated a lot of the material, I will admit I don't think all of them were exactly utilized the most effectively, which I think has something to do with the tone of the film. Of all the Predator movies, this is easily the darkest of them, and that's due to the trend of movies that was out at the time. This was released a few years after Batman Begins and The Dark Knight totally reinvented the blockbuster with these darker, grittier takes on Batman. And I've spoken about this before in other videos, but when those two movies were released, The Dark Knight in particular, that saw a boom in reboots, sequels, reimaginings, and whatever else you can think of where we got this gritty retelling of a popular character or franchise. Like, we even got Snow White and Hansel and Gretel movies that were doing this. And this was no exception to that craze. As I said, I'd argue this is probably the darkest of all the Predator movies. That's certainly the case with the color palette. You have a lot of characters grunting out their dialogue, especially Adrian Brody, and with there being a lot of updates in VFX, that allows for the kill sequences to look bloodier than ever. And while there's still some sense of fun due to just how gripping a lot of the action scenes were, you don't have quite as much of that. In particular, the humorous banter among the group like you had in the first film. There's some of that occasionally, but otherwise, this falls in line with a lot of those edgier reimaginings and reboots we've gotten around this time. And while I loved that at the time, since I was all in on those sorts of movies, I've definitely come down off of that now. So my enjoyment of this has gone down just a touch as a result of that. Because I think the first two Predators worked really well for being tense, but also for knowing how to have some fun at the same time. But that doesn't mean I dislike this movie now or anything. I still had a good time with it on my most recent rewatch. Rather than fun thrills, it instead goes for heightened brutality. Nothing to the point that it ever crosses a line, but as I said, with visual effects looking a lot better at this point than they did in the late 80s and early 90s, the action scenes looked a lot more pristine, making the kill sequences feel a little gnarlier. And similar to the original, the main reason this works is because of how to the point it is, telling a mostly quick-paced story about this one group of people versus the Predators. Now, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, my enjoyment of it doesn't go anywhere near as much as the original, but it's still a success. And And while it follows the basic template of the original, it does deviate in some ways, and it does work. I especially liked Lawrence Fishburne as someone who's been stuck on this planet for quite a long time and has started to lose his mind a bit from all of his time in isolation. They played around with that just a bit in the first movie with Bill Duke's character, and I think they did a good job in the way they expanded upon that concept a little further here. And I also like the idea of there being a turf war among a number of the predators, which creates an extra layer of conflict without overcomplicating things too much, and it just heightens the tension nicely and makes the obstacles these characters need to survive a little more rigorous. It definitely doesn't go too deep into that or anything, like we don't get this huge backstory about the lore of the predators or anything in that regard, but it was still cool to see. Now, the one thing I definitely would have liked for them to expand upon more was something else I mentioned earlier, and that's the dual meaning of the title. The film does lightly touch upon the idea that these people are also predators, since they've done terrible things in their past, though they're seeking redemption for what they've done, or at least some of them do. And not that I want to see a Predator movie, which works best when it does keep things simple, not that I want to see that deviate from that idea too much by getting so deep into these more thematic explorations, but if you're going to bring up this notion about these characters being just as terrible as the predators themselves, I think they could have gone a step further and committed to it a bit more. I don't think we necessarily need to go into a tangent so that the predators are completely forgotten about, but I think if you're going to go down that road, maybe just commit to it a little more. It was fine with what we got, including a twist with one of the leads, but it could have definitely gone a step further, and it wouldn't have distracted too much from fighting the predators. Only other thing, I like Adrian Brody, but I do think he's a bit miscast here. As I mentioned, he grunts his way through the majority of his dialogue in an attempt to sound a little more toughened and badass, and I don't think it really worked here. I'm always willing to give actors a chance to step out of their comfort zones and do something totally different. I try to keep an open mind when it comes to that, as you could find yourself pleasantly surprised. And while I think Brody wasn't outright bad or anything, this definitely isn't his strong suit, to be quite honest. Not that I don't think he can't be an action star altogether, but the persona he puts on here just doesn't fit him. It sounded like parody a bit at times, and either I think they should have gone down a different route with this character, or maybe went with someone else altogether for this role. It wasn't to the point that I despised it or anything, but it could have been better. And even though this was our main character, the fact I wasn't quite so on board with him didn't cause me to dislike the movie or anything, and that's because I enjoyed the supporting cast so much, along with all the action, that it more than made up for it. Predators is by no means an incredible movie, but it is solid entertainment. While its gritty, ultra self-serious tone was a bit much, and its characters aren't always the most likable, the performances do elevate a lot of the material, and the action scenes are effective and are pretty brutal. So despite the fact it definitely rehashes a lot of elements from the original and doesn't do everything quite as well, it's an all-around solid entry into this franchise. Predators gets a 7 out of 10. So stay tuned, as up next will be my review of 2018's The Predator. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see Predators, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Is this your favorite of the sequels, or one of your least favorite of the sequels? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.